So Daniel is a vegan feminist activist and a doctoral student at the University of Brasilia in Brazil. He's currently working with Dr. Lisa Kemmerer as a visiting scholar at Montana State University. His research is focusing on the links between the construction of masculinity and the glorification of violence against animals and women in contemporary capitalist societies. And since 2011, Daniel has offered his presentation, An Invisible Veil, at a handful of Brazilian universities and social collectives.
So I would like to thank, before I start my presentation, I would like to thank Tânia Mara Campos Almeida, my doctoral supervisor in Brazil, and I would like to thank Lisa Kemmerer, my doctoral supervisor here in the United States. And overall, I would like to thank Michael and Animal Liberation Ontario for the opportunity. They have been very patient and gentle with me. Thank you very much for that. The other day I was in the Rocky Museum of Natural History in Bozeman with my friends Lisa and Bonnie, and we were looking at the dinosaurs and all. And I always read those plates that explain what the dinosaurs are and everything. And one of these plates said that there's no way the archaeologists can know the colors of the dinosaurs. They based on birds and reptiles, they would choose randomly the colors for the dinosaurs. So I started to look to the dinosaurs to appreciate their colors. But I see so much more than colors, What I realized is that all the carnivores were portrayed like with male features, and all the herbivores had these really female features. And I thought they are not just guessing the color of the animals, but the genders too. They are creating social myths. And then I started to think the animal studies, that the most common view of animal studies, it's about deconstructing biological myths, like saying that the animals are sentient too, they are intelligent, they are emotional, but most of the distinctions that we as a society create from humans and animals, for humans and animals, are based on prejudice and values and essentialism. So the construct of species is not so different from the construct of race or gender. Is based on prejudice and values. For example, the idea of humanity is strongly based on a male self. The Vitruvian Man, one of the quintessential symbols for humanity, it's a male. So humanity is strongly based on an idea of a mankind, which is mainly influenced by an idea of manhood. As you all can think about, most of symbolic heroes that represent humanity are men. Like comic book heroes, like sports stars, or even God is commonly portrayed as a man. Even Santa Claus. The feminist philosopher Elizabeth Spellman, in her article Women as a Body from 1982, analyzed the work of Plato and the idea of humanity in Plato. And she analyzed that Plato created a dualist world. In one side we have a spiritual world, a world which God lives, a superior world where humans can ascend through spirituality and build this spirituality to rationality. On the other side, is that the natural earthly world, which not so elevated, which not so special, and it's meant to be controlled by this spirituality and this rationality. All the humans have the same souls and the potential to ascend to a godly condition through spirituality. But according to Elizabeth Spellman, Plato differentiates women from men, say that women are more susceptible to the influences of the body. So, in a certain way, to Plato, men have control women so they can ascend to a godly condition, so they can ascend in their spirituality. She discussed the concept of somatophobia. That means aversion to the body. Soma, body; phobia, aversion. But it's not truly a aversion, because when you feel aversion towards something, you cannot live with it. But men have to live with bodies, have to live with women, have to live in nature. So they create this controlled attraction context in which animals and women can live by very strict rules, by a very strict morality. So somatophobia is all about male dominance. But someone can say Plato Plato did his work so long ago. What does that mean about society today? When it comes to study advertisement, the ideal of male dominance, it's a very recurrent thing. Hypermasculinity is very important to understand the advertisement today. Hypermasculinity it creates an ideal of masculine self that has to express itself to violence, to dominance. Hypermasculine ideals of men, in this ideal, men have to be over dominant, over muscular, over aggressive, over threatening. They have to be stoic, insensitive. They cannot express themselves to a wide range of feelings, but they have to express themselves only to threat and aggression. This aggressivity can be directed to other men too, but in advertisement, this aggressivity is mainly directed to women and animals. You can see by these ads that in this context, women's consent doesn't play a part. They are like objects, or they are being forced to something, or they are being unstoppably attracted, like they cannot help themselves but being attracted to a hypermasculine ideal. That leads to the idea that advertisement maybe shows that we live in a culture of predation. What does that mean? In a context of predation, what is valued is a will of the force, a will of the power over consent. The hunter's will over the will of the prey. It's not about balance. It's not about harmony. It's not about consent. It's about power over will. And if you see predation like that, you will see that rape is just one of many forms of predation. For women, one of these parts is the part of women with meat. What women is, if meat means a domesticated woman, a woman that a woman that doesn't live for his needs, but lives to prepare a meat, lives to prepare a house, lives to prepare an environment so the man can live. Her life is entirely conditioned by the will of a man, by the will of patriarchy. In this commercial, you can see that woman's completely torn apart because she burned the meat. Nobody would be torn apart because got some food wrong or burned food. Only if their life is built around it. It's built around it because in a house. So patriarchy wants women to believe that when they not do this right, they are failing their husband. And it gets worse when the husband comes along and say, "Don't worry, darling, at least you didn't burn the beer." Like the best compliment he can make is say, "You're not stupid enough to burn the beer." That's very aggressive and condescending. Like in this commercial, that says, "Women don't leave the kitchen. We all know a woman's place is in the home, cooking a man a delicious meal." You see that this window looks really like a bar, a prison. A woman belongs in the domestic environment, and the man is free outside, and that's where she must be happy on the kitchen, building a domestic environment. One may ask, but these commercials are very old. What about today? This very recent commercial from Hillshire Farms put a very sexualized woman offering meat to a male or to a potential husband. You can interpret any way you want, but it's certainly a male. In this ad, she could never be happy by herself in her birthday. She has to seduce in some way her husband in order to achieve her own happiness. All her life goes through a domestic environment. All her life goes through a man. According to patriarchal views of women. This ad can be very confusing because we have characters that are being sexualized and we have characters that are being carnified. Is this turkey in a sexual or in a carnified or in a meat position? Is this women in a sexual or in a meat position? And for a deodorant commercial, that makes no sense at all. The other way, like we've seen in the last ads, the women can be portrayed in advertisements is when women is portrayed as meat. This advertisement connects perfectly with the previous ones. It states, "I can cook, who cares?" What she's saying is that I can be domestic, I can cook you a meal, but I can offer myself as meat. I can cook the meat, but I cannot cook the meat, but I can offer myself as meat. And like I think Carol Adams would say that woman has been fragmented into an absent referent. She is portrayed by patriarchal society as a hanging hook for her breast. The only thing that is focused in this advertisement is her breasts, and breasts are a very recurrent fragmentation. It's a very recurrent image in patriarchal advertising. Like you can see, breast is what to make of these ad. Is that a burger breast or a breast burger? In this sign you can read double this barbecue because the size of your rack matters. What patriarchy are saying to women and to meat is only the size of your rack matters. Another way that women can be portrayed in meat in advertisement is as hunting or fishing game. If you think about it, if people sit down on this table, what can they do to the woman that is what can they do that is not cruel or bizarre, But patriarchy internalizes these ideas of rape and predation so deeply that people doesn't see the bizarre thing to this picture normally. Another way that women can be portrayed as meat is when the act of eating meat is compared to the act of having sex. In this context, both of characters, meat and women, are portrayed as objects of consumption, clearly, and the act of consummation is very similar in patriarchal minds. Two, to that picture, I ask you all, does the meat in this picture covers the women's sexual parts or exposes it, or exposes them? Animals played in a similar way a sexual part in a predatory culture advertisement. And it's strange that these advertisements becomes more aggressive when it comes to seasoning and condiments advertisement. I think the patriarchal thought is very clear about that. To patriarchy society, what brings flavor to meat is the seasoning or the condiments. And to patriarchal society, what brings flavor to women is its sexuality. So, is this a duck woman or a woman duck? Is this a woman pig or a pig woman? Is this a chicken woman or a women chicken? These advertisements here are even more aggressive because of the slogan that states, makes food that easy. What patriarchal society is trying to say is, to eat meat with this ketchup is so easy as to rape promiscuous women. So they are comparing rape and predation in a very clear way. So the final question that this presentation asks is, in our predatory patriarchal societies, are women being sexualized, or are animals being sexualized, or are women being carnified? In this picture taken from Brian Luke's book Brutal Manhood and the Exploitation of Animals, you can see a great synthesis of what I'm talking about here. It's a hyper-masculine man with a penis-like harpoon fishing a sexualized woman, or more precisely, fishing a sexualized butt, a sexualized body part. It's very common that the image of male domination in advertisement towards women and towards animals to be very similar. They are very similar expressions. From my studies, I concluded that that's not about different oppressions that intersect in some way, but about the same male patriarchal oppressions over different subjects. That's why I make an appeal to feminists and vegan. Feminism and veganism are not about bringing change through oppression, but to defy oppression in order to bring change. We don't have to think of these social movements as a form of bringing empowerment, no matter what. But we have to think gender as a trans-species concept. In order to finish this presentation, I would like to quote Isaac Bashev Singer, who said, who said that when it comes to animals, we are all Nazis. And to finish this presentation, I would like to provoke and say, when it comes to animals, we are all sexist. Thank you very much. I'm not criticizing violence, but I am criticizing the construction of violence as a masculine thing and justification to oppress women and animals. It's not about violence in nature. Like, I don't believe that exists, but the construction of violence, the construction of violence as a social technology, as a social expression of masculinity. So, that's a vital concept to understand predatory culture. Because it's based on the false belief that men are essentially violent and dominant, and women are essentially domestic and submissive, and that's not true at all. So I'm questioning here not violence. I wouldn't know what to say about violence in essence or in nature, but I'm questioning here the social technologies of construction of violence, or the social constructions of gender over violence. Masculinity is often admired in vegan groups. Do you meet solidarity between veganism and feminism from men, or it's uncommon? So, well, it's very difficult to be a feminist vegan. For example, in the issues of abortion, I could never find a feminist vegan group that could make chorus to my voice, that would support me. I would always to defend the women's choice by myself, and Brazil is a very sexist country, and also I think I've been traveled through Brazil presenting to vegan and feminist groups in order to try to connect in people's minds veganism and feminism, but I don't think I am the most indicated person to do that deep down, because I am a middle class white heterosexual man, but I'm doing my best to do it, but I think currently here in the United States, as in Brazil, the feminist and the vegan movement are widely disconnected. Once I made a community in a social network that was veganism without homophobia, and I could convince in Brazil only 10 people to join me in that community. It was a big failure, So that was pretty frustrating, but I'm not giving up. I'm trying to, through masculinity, which as a man, a field that I can explore more, try to link to these two things. There's been a huge increase of women on hunting, but it is still not really relevant statistically speaking. Hunting is like a 90% men activity. So, but I believe it's not about when men or women doing things, because I believe that sexism is a generalized condition that we all must fight against. Men mainly. I think men are the ones have to fight it with more strength and be more, and has to be more strong about it, giving up their own privileges and all. But I think everyone was born in a sexist culture, and we have to question the gender constructions and the sexism, and women and and everyone can be sexist, and we have to watch us, and we have to always discuss that, you know. But I don't believe hunting is a sport. Hunting is a massacre, and it's very unfortunate that women are engaging in that practice, and it's very unfortunate they think that that's empowerment. That is not empowerment. That's a reinforcement of a culture of rape.